Welcome everyone. I hope you all are doing great. Now, in this lecture, we are going to start with the financing structure. We have already completed we started with the financing part. What are the financial projections? We completed that in the last lecture. In this lecture, we are going to talk about the financing structure. Now, when I talk about the term financing structure, in the very simple term, if I say what is a financing structure all about? Financing structure, if I talk about the capitals in a company, that is called as financing structure. So when I say the word, the total capital mix, the gearing, that all these things point towards the financing structure. Now, basically, there are two capitals that we will be discussing. The very first capital type is the equity financing. The other capital type is the debt. Okay, so there are two things. The very first thing is the equity financing. The second thing that we need to learn is the debt financing. Now, what is equity financing? I hope all of you already know that. We have been studying equity shares from class 11th and 12th. Equity financing. Now, first of all, financing structure. The choice between the equity and debt is basically a very crucial strategic decision that significantly impacts the financial structure, risk profile, and future growth potential of any company. When I talk about the equity financing, when I talk about equity financing, both the financing methods, be it equity, be it debt, they have its own pros and cons. When I talk about equity financing, it involves raising capital by selling ownership stakes in the company. I hope this is something very simple. That what is equity financing? We sell the stake. When someone sells the stake of the company, it is called as equity financing. So you sell the stake of the company and raise capital onto that part. That is called as equity financing. What is the pros? First of all, if I talk about the pros, you are not supposed to pay any fixed dividend or fixed debt. So no fixed debt obligation is there. First part is no fixed debt obligation. After that, cost is linked to the profitability. So more you make, more the higher the level of profit, higher the amount of dividend you are supposed to pay. So if the profits are not there, you are not supposed to pay anything at all. So it is linked to the profitability and hence it is good for the investors as well. Improved balance sheet. Since we do not need to repay the equity unless or until we are closing down the business, correct? We do not need to repay the equity. It enhances or improves the overall financial stability by maintaining a healthy gearing ratio. Now, what is gearing ratio? Gearing ratio is generally debt upon equity. So, if the gearing ratio of a company is good, it will enhance the company's financial. If the gearing ratio of a company is good, it will enhance the company's financial leverage and other parts. So, equity financing, make sure that you remember what are the pros. Okay. After that, if I talk about cons, in simple language, what are the cons that we already know of? First of all, we are selling out the stake of a company. So we are diluting our existing stake. So this is one of the very big cons that we already know of. After that, it affects the culture and strategy. Now new owners will be coming. Now new owners will be coming to the company. So definitely there will be an effect in the culture and the strategy part of the company. After that, higher cost of capital. So definitely the cost of capital will be very high in part of the equity. See, why the cost of capital is high, understand that. But although you already know, if you have completed the FM and AFM paper, you already know that the cost of equity is always higher than the cost of debt. Cost of equity is always higher than the cost of debt. Why? In the equity, the investor is taking a high risk. That is why the cost of equity will be high. In the debt, if you compare the debt and the equity part, the equity holder takes higher risk rather than the debt holder. Why? Because in debt, we have something which is called as fixed payment of interest. Do you really think, what do you think? There is no fixed payment in the part of the equity. That is why equity holders are at high risk if you compare them with the debt holders. I hope this part is clear to all of you that what is the major cons of the equity financing. Now, we talked about what are the pros and cons. So general example, a fast-paced company or a company which is a new company, a company which is a small cap company, which is still in a growing phase, they generally avoid the burden of debt and they prefer going with the equity part. two reasons. First of all, debt, they are not able, there is a cash constant in these companies. So they try to avoid burden of sorry, they avoid the burden of cash payments. Second thing is they are high growth companies. They find it easy to raise equity at high valuations. One of the examples, Shark Tank, you must have seen that how companies are raising so much of finances. Okay, so this was one of the example that what are the different pros and cons of your equity. Coming to the debt part, everyone. If I talk about the debt, basically an amount that needs to be repaid with interest. What are the different pros? First of all, if I remember the pros, it does not affect the ownership structure of the company since you are not selling out the stakes of the company. So there will be no change in the ownership. Second is, in the debt payment, we get tax benefit because interest is a tax deductible cost. So we get tax benefit when we pay interest amount. And the cost of capital is lower than the equity. So three clear benefits: tax benefits, lower cost of capital, and it does not affect the ownership of a company. When I talk about the cons, first of all, fixed cost, we have to pay the cost no matter whether we are making the profit or we are making the loss. So there is a fixed cost component that actually hurts a number of companies. Then it actually requires collateral. Generally, these companies require collateral. Collateral is what? Basically security. You put an asset in the form of security in the company from where you are taking a loan. So it actually affects the gearing ratios of the company as well. But the major problem is it requires collateral. So if there's a company which is a asset light company, matlab there are not heavy assets. These companies find it very difficult to raise debt. If you are not putting the collateral, although you can raise debt, but over there the cost of debt will be higher. Also, it limits the future borrowing capacity. It limits future borrowing capacity of the company. One more thing, actually a high amount of debt, if I talk about signal, poor signal. When I talk about high amount of debt is considered as a poor signal by the companies. I hope you guys will agree with this thing. High amount of debt is generally considered as a poor signal by the companies, not the companies, by the investors. So they avoid investing in such companies. I hope this thing is clear to all of you. Now, pros and cons. If I talk about what are the different examination questions that you can get, be prepared to discuss the pros and cons of different financing options in the context of the given scenario. Basically, you have to use the case. While writing down your answer, you have to use the case. Talk about the pros and the cons from that case only. After that, link the financing choices to the company's strategic position and goal. So if it is a new company, of a growth oriented company, equity will be better. But if the same company does not want to sell out the stakes, so that will be better. So you have to take care of what is being asked in the question, and then you are supposed to write down in the answer. Consider the company's current financial position when recommending financing options. So if a company has already raised a lot of debt in the past, so what you would suggest, ki bhai, instead of how would you get to know? You have to calculate the gearing ratio over there. So financial ratios over there, what we studied back there, and now you are calculating something which is a financial ratio over here. After that, discuss the impact of financing choices on key financial ratios like gearing and interest cover. I already talked about this thing. Consider the signaling effect of financing choices. For example, a company opting for a large equity issuance might signal to the market that its shares are overvalued. Why do you think this thing has been written over here? See, if a company generally, this is a very, finance from equity. So generally there's it signals to the market that its shares might be overvalued. That is why they are selling their stake to us. Correct. They are selling their stake to us. Must be something wrong with the company. Why are they selling their stake? What is the importance? So n number of things, n number of signals goes to the stock market investors. That is why it could be one of the reasons. Although if you don't want to put it, you don't need to write it there, but it will be fine if you write it as well. Consider the current market conditions. In period of low interest rates, debt might be more attractive, while times of high equity valuations, share might be preferred. Now, in period of low interest का मतलब होता है बेटा, if I talk about the period of low interest, they are talking about low inflation rates. So if there's a company, if there's a country where there is a low inflation rate, so you automatically get to know कि they are talking about low interest rates. If there's a country where the interest rates are very high, and they're not saying it, but they are saying the inflation is very high. So they are pointing out to you that inflation is high, so interest rates will be higher as well. So it's not compulsory that the examiner will tell you everything again and again. Certain time he can directly ask you any part of the question. So these are the pros and cons. So when I talk about what question might be coming to the exam, they might give you a case and there will be a question on the management is confused about whether to go with the equity part or whether to raise the finance from the debt part. You are supposed to help them out. How you would be helping them out, everyone? Basically, you have to talk about whether equity is better, whether debt is better, talk about the pros that are given in the question. You have to analyze it, and then you have to give them an option what to go with. Certain times it is not being asked what is better. If they are asked, discuss whether equity and debt, what is better. So they are not asking you for a choice. They are just asking you to discuss. So you just talk about the pros which is given in the question. You talk about the cons which are given in the question, and that's it, everyone. So this is what actually you'll be writing in the exam. So I hope this part of the pros and cons of the debt and equity part is clear. Basically, it talks about the financing structure. Always remember that equity is expensive, debt is cheaper. Equity may you have to sell out the stakes. Debt may you are not supposed to sell out any stake. So basically, these are two most important features of the equity and debt part, everyone. So the new topic that we have is budgets. Budgets are actually very important when it comes to the exam preparation, but they have been asked like number of times. So please give due consideration to the topic of the budget. Now, first of all, what is budget? Basically, it is a process, a financial process where we plan out what are the expenses, what are the revenues that we are going to have in the next 1 year, 3 year, or 5 year. Even in India, we make 5 year plans as well. This is again a kind of budget. Basically, it is very important for your exam to understand how to analyze the budgets. And analyzing these budgets, you have to drive the strategic insight. This is the two things that you are supposed to do for your SBL examination. So how actually you will be analyzing the budgets? First of all, what are the key points for the budget? You always remember three things. There is something called as fixed budget. There is something called as flex budget, and how to compare. So talk about fixed budget, talk about flex budget, and the reasons behind the variance. So first of all, let me tell you what actually everything is. If I talk about using the flex budgets for fair comparison. So over here, 3 points I have actually mentioned. First of all, use flex budget for fair comparison. Let me tell you what is flex budget and fixed budget. Let's say I planned that I'll be selling out 20,000 units in a year. 20,000 units in a year. That was my fixed budget. I planned out everything as per 20,000. And I said that my profit after selling out 20,000 units will be close to 1 lakh. I said this thing. Now came the COVID. Now, due to COVID, do you think that I would have been able to sell out 20,000 units? Do you really think so? Is it possible to sell 20,000 units in the time of COVID? This was my plan when everything was in a constant market, when everything was normal. In the COVID, there was a complete shutdown in the different economies. I was not able to sell 20,000 units. I was able to sell only 5,000 units, 10,000 units. Instead of 20,000, I sold out only 10,000. Now I will re-prepare everything as per my 20,000 selling ki jagah 10,000 sales. Instead of 20,000 sales, I made 10,000 sales of units. So I will re-prepare everything considering these 10,000 of sales. So what would be my total selling value or my total profit that I should book? Now it should be close to 50,000. Let's say I did not make 50,000, I made the profit of 20,000. So now can you think of which profit should be compared? 20,000 and 50,000? That is my flex budget. Or should I compare 20,000 and 1 lakh. That was my original budgeted profit. Now the new profit, the new budgeted profit that you thought of, that is 50,000. You will be using this 50,000 profit instead of the 1 lakh profit that you made in the first budget. So what was the first budget? That was the pre-budget or the first budget, that is the fixed budget. Now, because things change, environment change, or things were not working in your favor, what you made? You made another budget that is called as a flex budget. Now you will compare actuals with the flex budget. You turned out that you sold out, you thought of now because of the COVID, I would be selling only 10,000 units. Now, instead of 10,000, you sold out 8,000 units. So you compare these two, the actual and the flex budget, actual and the flex budget, and also compare with the prior actuals. Last year what happened, but up COVID is a new situation. So you cannot talk about the COVID in this scenario. That is why whenever you are writing the SBL paper, it is actually very important for you to understand how to write out things. Because see, whatever I'm teaching you right now, it means nothing if you do not use your commercial acumen everyone. So acumen is something that you have to maintain at all the level. Now, what is acumen? That you are aware of the real environment. So in the exam, that they can ask you a question on the COVID as well. So don't think because SBL paper mein the questions that they ask are more or less based on the real exam scenarios, the real world scenarios. So there can be a question on the COVID or anything else. So three things that you have to take care. You have to use flex budgets for fair comparison. After that, compare the actual with the flex budgeted and the prior actual. After that, talk about the reasons for variances. So you have to talk about these three things. A flex budget adjusts the original budget to the actual level of activity. This allows for a fair comparison. This three-way comparison, that is your actual with the flex with the actual, and actual with the prior. This three-way comparison provides a comprehensive view of performance. Comparing with flex budget shows performance against expectation. Comparing with prior shows year-on-year improvement. After that, identify significant variances and investigate their causes. So these are the three things that you are supposed to write in the exam. I hope this part is clear. What are the three things? First of all, prepare a flex budget and compare your fixed budget with the flex budget. Oh, sorry, compare your actuals with the flex budget and the prior year actuals as well. After that, whatever variances are there in the actual and the flex budgets, you have to discuss onto that factors. I hope this part is clear to all of you, everyone. Let us take a look at what are the examiner notes and additional tips. When I talk about the notes, understand the concept of flex budgets. You may be asked to explain why budgets provide a fairer comparison than fixed budgets, which is actually very simple. Why flex budgets provide better or a fair view rather than the fixed budget? Because flex budget may we have already considered all the changes that are required. We thought the selling price will be 25 rupees per unit, but now the customer preference have changed. So we have to sell for 24. Now the profit level will definitely decline. So flex budget is more based on to the real things that are actually happening. But fixed budget is something that we have prepared in the very start of the year. And fixed budget means we do not change any variables. Prioritize explaining variances over calculation. The focus on the why behind the numbers and not on the arithmetic. I have already told you like number of times this SBL paper may calculations are not that important. But the reason, but the question of answer of why is actually very important. Okay, so this thing is true for this part as well. Link budget variances to strategic objectives and external factors. How do these variances impact the company's ability to achieve its goal? Discuss implication of variances on future planning and control. So even if you have identified any variance, so why was there a variance? Did the company took out any, let's say I changed my marketing strategy and this year the selling volume has increased. So now you are talking about sales trend. First of all, you talked about the sales trend. And what is the reason behind change in the sales trend? Sir, I have changed the marketing strategy. That is why there is a change in the sales trend as well. Talk about these things. You have to talk about these things. Why when there's a change in the sales trend, there's a change because of change in the marketing strategy. So you have to discuss on to the reason, and if there is a change, think of the strategic from the strategic point of view why there is a change. what is that what management decision has changed that particular variable. Okay. Consider both financial and non-financial reason for variances. For example, a variance in sales might be due to change in market share, product quality, or customer satisfaction. Recommend action based on your analysis. So certain times in the exam, they can ask you on for the recommendations purpose as well. Although generally recommendations are not asked much in the exam, but as I told you, examiner, be ready for any new rock coming to your side. Examiner can ask you anything. This might include revising forecast, implementing new controls, or adjusting strategies. Now remember that not all variances are bad. Favorable variances should be analyzed to understand and potentially replicate success. So it's not compulsory that every time, whatever you are seeing, every time the variance, whenever there's a variance, it's a negative variance. It's not compulsory. Certain times variances can be good as well. So now if the variance is good, you have to identify how to replicate that particular good variance every time. Are you getting my point, everyone? If there is a change in variance, if there's a change in variance, you have to identify why. If it's a negative variance, you have to control it so that next time it will not happen. If there's a positive variance, you have to find out the reason that to make sure that every time you are able to replicate it. Okay, so this is on to the project management part. So the first thing was budget. What are you supposed to talk about in budget? First of all, you are supposed to talk about three things. First of all, you say we calculate a flex budget. After that, compare the actuals with the flex budget. After that, talk about the variances. So these are the three important points that you are supposed to write in your exam. Now coming to the next topic, that is your project management. Again, this is a very important topic. Budget, project management are actually very important. Then there will be a PID that will be studying after this topic. What is project management, first of all? Now, project management is actually every time, certain number of times companies take on to new projects, right? So when I was an investment banker, I had my company used to have different projects. Even at my home, we had to take on different projects as well. So even if you guys are in college, you'll be taking on different projects. So project is defined as a one-off special activity that is not a part of my regular day-to-day task. If you guys will become consultants, if you guys will become audit experts, financial experts, you will be taking out the different projects for your company. So effective project management becomes very crucial for the point of view of company for the project management. So what are the different components that we have to take care over here, everyone? First of all, what are the different project components? There are actually three things that you have to take care. The very first thing is your quality, then your time, and then your cost. Quality, time, and cost. Now, what does quality refers to? What does quality refers to? It refers to the standard of deliverables and the project's ability to meet specified requirement. So let's say the customer or the end client is saying, sir, I want XY quality of goods. I want XY quality of goods. Now you are supposed to provide them with the XY quality. If you are giving them with the YZ quality, the client will not be happy with that thing. The client will never be happy with that thing. That is why when you guys will start working with a Big Four or Big Six now, there is a review process. After you complete the work, someone will come and review your work. Or any of the company, not just Big Four or Big Six. If you start working with any of the companies, before submitting your work, they review your work because they want to ensure the quality of work. They want to ensure the superior quality of the work. So it refers to the standard of deliverables and the project's ability to meet specified requirement. Okay, so this is the very first thing, quality. That you cannot go through with the quality of the project. Quality should be the top notch or what is required by the client. So it encompasses project specification and standards, defines the required level of excellence. Talk about the product or the service features, talk about the performance metrics, talk about the compliances requirements, user satisfaction, in a software development, project quality might be measured by the number of bugs, user satisfaction, or compliance. So project quality mein you can talk about any of these three, four things. Sir, how can I come up with something in the answer? One question that you might be having, how can we write up with something? Okay, so when you get a question like this, what you are supposed to do, beta, check if there are number of customer complaints. Check if there has been increase in the sales volume after a new project. So you have to identify these three, four things in the exam, and then you are supposed to write down your answer. After that, talk about the timeline. Now, when I say the word timeline, in the timeline, you are supposed to talk about within which time, stipulated time, you are completing the project. It's of no use if you are not able to complete the project within the given time period. So the schedule of the for project completion, including key milestones and deadlines. Talk about project start and end dates, milestone scheduling, resource stream time allocation, and certain basic things over here. Time management directly impacts both the cost and quality. So the second thing, what is the second thing that you guys are supposed to check? Time quality. Okay, everyone. After that is the cost. Cost is the key part of any of the project. You are saying that there will be cost of 20,000, and even if the quality is top notch, you completed on the time and you took 35,000 instead of 20,000. The project will be considered as a failure. Okay. So the cost allocated for the project include all the labors, resources, and any XYZ material. It encompasses all financial metrics. It includes budget allocation, resource cost, operating expense, contingency funds, and everything. Okay, so all the three things, that is your cost, quality, and time, all of them are interconnected. Let's say you want to ensure that you complete the project in time. So certain time you have to put extra labors. Due to extra labors, what will happen? The cost will be, there can be a higher cost. You want to complete the project on time. You are ready to put the extra labors, but you again want to complete on time. So what you will do? You can, use a cheaper raw material, due to which the cost will come down, but the quality will now be hampered. So all the three things are actually interconnected, and it is your responsibility to take care of this interconnection. So quality, time, and management. Now you have to, whenever you have to come up with any of the answer, you have to make sure that whatever and howsoever you are writing, or whatsoever or howsoever you are giving the reason for something, it should be beneficial for all the three things. Try to give such an answer. Okay. Post-project review and post-implementation review. What is post-project review? After the project has been completed. So talk about how the project was managed, focused on the mistakes and the lessons that you have learned from that particular project. That is post-project review. Matlab, after you have completed the project. Now, post-project review, it does not mean it will be there after you have completed the whole project. It can be during the certain stages of project as well. Post-implementation review is, let's say you completed the project starts running, the customer starts coming, they are buying and selling, and now it has become the normal course for business. Post-implementation. So after post-implementation, you have to talk about what is the reason behind taking on this project? Did you achieve that objective or not? What was the major reason behind taking on that project, and did you achieve that objective or not? This will answer whether the project was successful or the project was a failure. So you have to talk about these two things after completing the project. So first of all, talk about three things. First of all, talk about the important project components. After talking about the project components, we'll be talking about the post-project review and post-implementation review. So you have to talk about all these things while writing down your answer of your project management. Cost, quality, time, first of all, project components. After that, post-project review. After that, post-implementation review. So this is all about the projects, everyone.